Okay, so the last forum, for those of you who were there, most of you I think were, was our first kind of foray into Zoom, which went pretty well, had some good feedback. People particularly liked the breakout rooms, which I really, really wanted to do again today. But following an appeal I sent out for people to talk or represent themselves or speak, we had such a tsunami of response. We actually had enough to last the whole day. And I was at one point thinking of making this a whole day event, but that wouldn't possibly have worked too well. So many thanks to all of those who offered to speak today. Apologies if you've had to have a shorter session than you wanted. And also thanks to those who understood that there wasn't enough space, then we can put them on next time. At one point, we were going to have bays and Ofgem also. For a variety of reasons, it didn't kind of work out with Ofgem. And much of the bays stuff is going to be covered by other speakers. But I have, and I will ask them if they can come along to the next forum, which will probably be March, April time. We'll see. Okay, so this morning we've got me rambling for a couple of minutes, and then we've got our fuel policy update from NEA, Matt Copeland. Rachel from ALIO, updating us on ALIO stuff and connected issues. Zoe from Citizens Advice Coventry, who will be talking about supporting vulnerably housed people in the West Midlands. 11:10, you'll be pleased to know a short break. Ask you please to stick to 10 minutes and then rush back. Ellen Cooper-Tiedemann from the West Midlands, the Midlands Energy Hub, will be talking about the LAD, Local Authorities Delivery Phase 2, Green Homes Grant things. And then Laura Towler from Auriga will have a short space to talk about referrals, grants and emergency funding. Deep breath, and there's more. These are short, sort of local issue based, what's on in the West Midlands type stuff next. So Agility Eco, Walsall Housing Group and Coventry City Council talking about a variety of things, health, hope, happiness, social housing, retrofits and all sorts of stuff. So that's what we're doing today. So without further ado, I will ask Brian, our techie expert, to put us onto the fuel poverty policy update. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to the NEA Winter Forum 2020 Policy Update. I'm Matt Copeland, the Policy Manager at NEA, and I'm going to take you through some of the policy developments of the last quarter. So here are some of the recent highlights. So we've had a comprehensive spending review, updates to the minimum energy efficiency standards in the private rented sector. NEA's released our fuel poverty monitor for the year. We've had a consultation on the warm home discount scheme. We've had new supplier license conditions for pre-payment meter customers, new protections. And NEA's released a debt paper from our water poverty work. I'm going to go through each of these in turn, and I'm going to end up with a slide on what's coming up next. So firstly, I'll touch on the spending review. This happened at the end of November, and going into this, NEA were calling for 5 things, and it's useful to remember as well that this was initially going to be a spending review that allocated funding for government departments for 3 years, from 21 to 23, but the Chancellor changed his view on things and wanted to allocate funding for 1 year only because of the crisis. We made these asks when we thought it was a longer review, so we wanted clarity on the warm home discount for the period 21 to 26. We wanted full implementation of those Conservative manifesto energy efficiency schemes, the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund and the Home Upgrade Grant Scheme. We also wanted an extension for the energy company obligation to 26. We wanted to ensure the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is a replacement of the EU structural funds that we'll lose after Brexit. So we wanted that fund to be announced, and for that money in that fund to be allowed to be used to improve homes in terms of their energy efficiency. And we wanted to extend and strengthen the increased universal credit for low-income households to keep that £20 a week uplift. So going through each of these in turn, we saw different levels of success. So we have had a year's clarity on the future of warm home discount with a consultation that I'll go through in a bit. We've got 1 year's worth of funding for what we're assuming is the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, a new home upgrade grant scheme for fuel poor homes. So seems like we have the first year for that funding. We previously, the week before, in the Prime Minister's 10-point plan, received confirmation that ECO will be continued until March 26, and will maintain its focus on low-income and vulnerable households, which is great. The Chancellor did announce that the Shared Prosperity Fund would start, and that money could be used to improve housing. We unfortunately did not get the increased universal credit we hoped for, or maintaining that increase that we hoped for, but we're still hopeful that we can get it before April next year when that increase ends, and we'll be continuing to campaign on that issue. So that's the spending review, a relatively successful one for NEA and what we were trying to achieve from it. Next is the minimum energy efficiency standards for the private rented sector, which my colleague from BEIS has, I believe, would have taken you through already. But just to reiterate, so BEIS are consulting on extending the energy efficiency performance standards in the private rented sector so that they reach EPC C by 2028, with landlords being required to spend up to £10,000 to meet that new standard. They've also consulted on whether that should be £10,000 or £5,000 or £15,000. Our emerging view on that figure of £10,000 or £5,000 or £15,000 is that higher is better. £15,000 would upgrade 60,000 more fuel poor homes to EPCC than a £10,000 cap, and it would cost on average landlords £600 more per property. We think that's really good value to get that many households up to EPCC. But we also think that the stick of that regulation, because it is a lot of money, it should be complemented by a carrot. And those carrots could be, for example, a tax exemption for landlords purchasing energy efficiency measures, for example, the landlord energy saving allowance that had previously been in place in the 2000s, and allowing landlords to access grant schemes like has been done in the Green Homes Grant. However, if landlords do have access to grant schemes, we believe they should not be able to increase rents for a number of years afterwards. We've landed on 3. We don't think it would be fair on tenants for landlords to receive money from government, but then increase their rents on the back of that. The impact assessment for the consultation does assume that landlords pay for measures by increasing rents, so we do think there needs to be some mechanism to stop them doing that if they're paying for those energy efficiency uplifts through grants. Enforcement has been an issue for the current standards of EPC E by this year. So we were pleased to see that BEIS are consulting on improving the help for local authorities for enforcement. We think they can go further than what they proposed, and we consider a national landlord database to be the best way forward. There is something like that in the consultation, but it doesn't go the whole hog, we don't think. And we fully back the Commission on Fuel Poverty's idea for that, which sort of replicates what's being done in Wales already to some extent. So overall, actually the proposals within this consultation are pretty good. And it's just the detail around the fringes that need to be sorted out to make this work as well as possible for fuel poor households. Onto the Fuel Poverty Monitor. So you may be aware that this is a report that NEA releases every year looking at the state of the energy market for fuel poor households. This year we focused on coronavirus because what else could we do? And we used our own work on the ground, so we spoke to our own guys running projects to see what experience they'd had over this spring and summer, but we also talked to other organisations to see how they'd been affected by the crisis and how the people they were helping had been affected. And for households, we saw 5 main impacts. Firstly, an increase in energy use as more people were spending more time at home, and obviously that gets more acute over winter as we're still in lockdowns, and spending more time at home during the heating season means a lot more energy use. Secondly, a reduction in income. Lots of jobs have been lost, lots of people placed on furlough, and generally incomes have reduced. Third, those two things lead to increased affordability issues and therefore debt, which leads in turn to energy rationing and more self-disconnection for prepayment customers who face real challenges in keeping their meters topped up. Fourth, we've seen, because of the pandemic and really in spring and summer, installers finding it much more difficult to do their job. We've seen a huge reduction in smart meter and eco installs over that period, meaning that fewer prepayment households had smart meters so that they couldn't top up remotely, that had to go to the shops where maybe they'd been told to stay inside, and fewer households would have received energy efficiency upgrades than otherwise. It is important to note that smart meter installations spiked quite a long way towards the end of summer and autumn, as have eco installs. So it looked like we're back on track for these now, but still those reductions in spring will have a fairly profound effect on households. And fifth, there are difficulties in accessing support, especially where households were digitally excluded or spoke English as an additional language. There was lots of support out there from suppliers after they made an agreement with BEIS to do so, but a lot of that support was online in English. So those households who didn't have access to the internet or couldn't speak English particularly well often missed out on that support. To rectify these things, we have identified 5 areas for recommendations. Firstly, better identifying need, so using data sharing between suppliers and the PSR, between government and suppliers with the Digital Economy Act, sharing data on benefits, and also making better use of the shielding patients list to identify those households who are most at risk of coronavirus and also having to stay at home, to identify those households who are most in need. We think that this data sharing is really important and needs to be accelerated. Secondly, raising awareness and communicating support in a more accessible way, so use of more languages, use of more formats, not just digital only, to make sure that people know the support that's available to them and can access that support. Then better supporting prepayment households, and I'll go on later as to what Ofgem have done to this, but basically putting more new protections in for prepayment customers who are likely to self-disconnect. And actually Ofgem have acted on this pretty swiftly, and we're in a much better situation now than we otherwise were. Next, addressing utility debt, and I'll talk about our proposals for debt later in the presentation, but really government contributing more to addressing debt in terms of contributing money would make a massive difference for households. And last on the list, addressing a hiatus in policy making. So we know that the government quite rightly changed its focus from the more general energy strategy, fuel poverty strategy, towards combating the virus. Now we're in a position where we need movement on a lot of things. We're a white paper not having come out yet. Maybe it has come out by the time you hear this recording. We have a fuel poverty strategy that we're expecting. A decarbonising heat in home strategy, lots of things we're waiting for, and we need a direction to move in, and this needs to be done relatively urgently. So we made lots of more recommendations than that in the paper. I'd urge you to have a look at the monitor, to have a look for yourself. Next, on to the warm home discount extension. So I mentioned this in passing earlier, but BEIS have consulted on the future of the warm home discount, and they proposed a single-year extension to it. And their proposals are essentially to maintain the rebate part of the scheme. So the core group and broader group as is, it remains as is, and the £140 rebate remains as is. and to slightly change the industry initiatives part of the scheme so that it better handles debt, in Bayes' opinion. So our view on this was that Bayes should prioritise ensuring that the required legislation to secure the scheme for next year is expedited. We think there's a real risk that the legislation won't get over the line before the start of the scheme. And if that happens, then industry initiative projects will be delayed, which is not an acceptable outcome. So we think this needs to be expedited. We think that those broader changes that NEA has campaigned for, so that more people can receive a rebate, should be accelerated. We understand why Bayes didn't feel they could do it next year with the crisis just happened and the delay to the legislation, but that needs to happen from the year 22 to 23. And lastly, the proposed changes to industry initiatives should be carefully consider the trade-offs. So more money for debt clearance means less money for energy advice, debt advice and benefits advice. Those are often more valuable than fuel vouchers and shouldn't necessarily be traded out. But on the whole, good to have this extended, and we hope that the legislation can go through relatively swiftly. Next, and again I mentioned it earlier, Ofgem are implementing new licence conditions for all suppliers with regards to prepayment meters and repaying debts. And this is the culmination really of quite a big piece of work that Ofgem have been doing to better help prepayment customers who have a high propensity to self-disconnect. So 2 years worth of work has gone into identifying the scale of the problem, identifying some potential solutions, and Ofgem are implementing these 3 changes to the licence condition in reaction to what they've heard. The new rules will mandate suppliers to identify prepayment customers that do self-disconnect. So suppliers will have to identify their self-disconnecting customers, and through other licence conditions they will then need to offer them appropriate support. Suppliers will also now, all suppliers have to offer friendly credit, emergency credit and additional support credit, so top-ups for struggling households. They don't specify minimum amounts for those support mechanisms, just that they have to be offered. You may be thinking that most suppliers do offer these, but not all do, so this is quite a good step forward. It standardises it across the industry. They must be offered. NEA did campaign for minimum amounts for these, but Ofgem have chosen not to be that prescriptive, which is a route that Ofgem prefer to take with a lot of things. Lastly, and probably making the most difference to the households that we work for, are integrating ability to pay principles into the licence, and this covers all customers in debt, not just prepayment customers, and that ensures that suppliers have appropriate credit management policies and guidelines, that they make proactive contact with customers, that they understand from that an individual customer's ability to pay in terms of the amount they can afford, that they set repayment rates based on the amount that a customer can afford, that they ensure the customer understands the arrangement to pay back the debt, that the supplier monitors that arrangement after it's been set up, and if a customer has a failed repayment, that they re-engage with that customer to understand their ability to pay in new circumstances, and then set a new repayment rate based on that new ability to pay. So a customer is never paying more than they can afford. This is really important because it sets repayment rates at a much more reasonable rates for each customer. And we've already seen some suppliers start doing this before the licence condition comes into play in the 15th of December. So these changes have already had a tangible impact on people's lives, which is exactly what we were looking for when we were campaigning for these to come into place. So we're really happy that these are in place. There's more that Ofgem can do to support households, but this is a really good start. And the last thing I want to talk about is debt. And my colleague Jess Cook has put together this fantastic paper, Surviving the Wilderness, looking at the landscape of personal debt in the UK, and it considers water debt, energy debt, and council tax debt. And Jess looked at the scale of debt across those 3 sectors, what it means for households, and then what we recommend to help households to deal with that debt. and we have 5 recommendations. Firstly, that the government should bring forward breathing space legislation, which is new legislation expected in spring next year, about May, to give households breathing space for their debts, so an extra 6 weeks to start paying off their debts if they want it. We think that should be brought forward in time, so before May, and that the 6 weeks should be extended to longer. I think in Scotland they have 6 months. We also think that companies should consider whether they can implement this earlier themselves without the legislation, much like some suppliers have done with the ability to pay principles that I've just talked about. Secondly, that the government should make contributions for payment matching schemes. So some water companies have offered payment matching schemes where if a customer puts in £2, they'll put in £1 to clear the debt. We think the government should consider how they can play a part in that in both water and energy. Thirdly, those ability to pay principles that are now in play in the energy market should be made consistent across all utilities, making debt repayment much easier for everyone. Fourth, those opportunities for maximising data sharing between suppliers and between utilities and between the government utilities should be explored to ensure that customers moving into financial difficulty are caught at the earliest possible opportunity. And an example of this is that because water is not a priority debt, people tend to default on their water bills earlier than other bills. And if that information can be shared across sector, then we can catch people before they fall into difficulty in energy, for example. So this is really important. And last, we think all utility companies should consider how a single definition of severe indebtedness can ensure that customers are treated fairly. Now I'm going to talk quickly about what's coming up. So there's lots of significant developments and milestones coming up. I have an energy white paper that will be wide-ranging, considering generation, networks and retail. So that's really important for all of us because it will say how the energy market works. We have a decarbonising heat and building strategy from BEIS, which is obviously very important for fuel poor households because it will determine how we decarbonise our heating and who pays for that, how much it will cost, and all of those things. We have a fuel poverty strategy underpinning lots of these things that I'm hoping my colleague from BEIS has talked about. A national infrastructure strategy has just been released, which, to be fair, just defers a lot of decisions to the decarbonising heat and building strategy, but sets out that this is a priority for government. Ofgem will set out its final determinations for gas networks, deciding how much money they can charge their customers between 21 and 26, but also how much money they can spend on helping vulnerable households in that period too, which is very important. And lastly, but not least at all, Treasury are doing their work on net zero, the net zero review, which is looking at who should pay to reach net zero, who should pay those costs. Should it be recovered by tax or through energy bills or other mechanisms? They have an interim report due quite soon, and there will be some very interesting results there on Treasury's thoughts. There's lots more coming up as well, but we think these are the main things. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, then let the organisers know, and policy team will try and answer them as best as possible. But I hope you enjoy the rest of the forum. Thank you very much.
Do you know, I knew I was going to do that. So yes, thank you, Matt, for that, even though you're not there to speak to us directly. Something I should have mentioned earlier is that if you have any questions, please do fill them in on the chat facility, and we can answer them if we can. Okay, that's fine. So I'd like to introduce Rachel. No introduction necessary probably, but Rachel from Alio is going to tell us what she's been up to and what's going on in the region in general. Thanks, Rachel.
Lovely. Thank you, Andy. I am going to endeavour to share my screen. So if you could let me know if you can actually see my screen, Andy, that would be fabulous.
Yes, I can.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, I can. I hope everybody else can.
Well, yeah. Well, if you can, that's a start anyway. Hopefully others will really. So it's just a bit of a brief overview of what's happening in the world of ALIO, or the Association of Local Energy Officers Midlands. So my name's Rachel Jones and I chair the West Midlands. So you've got the joys of me this morning. And then my colleague, we have a new vice chair, Rob, and I'll talk a little bit about sort of the setup, because you may or may not have noticed that the colours for Alio have slightly changed. We've gone all purple this morning, and that's really is that the fact that we've merged the West and the East Midlands together to form Alio Midlands, primarily because now with the invent of Zoom and etc., Teams, etc., it's much easier now to have wider meetings, and because of a lot of the work that's coming forward. So I know Ellen's going to discuss some of the energy hub side of things later, but it just made sense really to combine the two regions together from an Alio point of view, as that's the way sort of the wider market is at the moment, for want of a better word. So just to give you a bit of a background, so that was agreed at our last Alio meeting. So we now have a new executive for Alio Midlands, which is made up of 6 members, 3 from each region. So 3 from the West and 3 from the East Midlands. And the vice chair, Rob Leeson, is from Leicester, and he's from the East Midlands. So just to give people a bit of background, I think most of you have heard me before talk about what Alio is, but essentially it's made up of energy officers, primarily from local authorities, but also from housing associations and the charity third sector as well. And then we also have support from the commercial side of things as well, but it's predominantly there to support those of us that have to deal with the ever complex and ever changing energy market, and really providing support and guidance on the challenges that face us all at the moment, this ever changing industry that we are in. So what have we been up to most recently in regards to Alio? We've been doing quite a bit of work at the moment with BEIS around eco, or what is going to be the next eco. So as Matt said, eco has now been extended to 2026 as part of the 10-point plan. And we've been talking to BEIS about what that might look like, and specifically from a local authority point of view about EcoFlex and what that actually means in regards to the existing EcoFlex. So some of you may or may not be aware that EcoFlex was audited by Ofgem during the summer. So they audited 35, I think, local authorities were audited. Essentially, they looked at the local authorities who had already installed over 500 measures by that point. So we're looking at the authorities that were signing the largest amounts of declarations, and really looked at the sort of key things that were coming out of that for going forward. So one of the areas they really wanted to look at and came out of that evaluation was around the income thresholds. Some of you will be aware that those income thresholds are very, very variable, and some were considerably higher than others, and they were finding that some local authorities were changing their income areas because a neighbouring authority had a slightly higher one, and it was impacting on the delivery in their area. So one of the potential areas that BEIS are looking at is looking at a cap on the income threshold levels, somewhere around £30,000. There's also quite a lot of difference between the verifications of income, really depending on the capacity within the local authority, and or whether it happens to have an energy agency that's supporting it to help it do that. So there's quite a lot of variability on that. So that's an area they want to look at. Declarations, they really wanted to look at the date of install. In some cases, there wasn't necessarily a date around when that was signed off. And just really making sure that the governance around Flex was sort of nailed down a little bit more, what reporting is going to be required back to Ofgem, etc. So basically looking to have a full-scale consultation around of eco. Realistically, it's going to be next year, so probably winter, spring of next year. But as Alio, what we are looking to do is actually speak to members prior to that and do a survey of members, really looking at case studies of how you're currently delivering eco. So if there's any local authorities out there, how it's currently being delivered, problems and challenges, the good bits, the bad bits, all that sort of information we want to try and sort of pull out so we can feed that back into BEIS to try and make sure that they are looking for Flex to be re-included again, but to just make sure that it works for the local authorities, but also obviously works for the people that we're all trying to support and help with their ever-challenging issues around energy at the moment. So that's one of our big sort of areas we're working on at the moment. Again, also, as Matt also suggested, we are looking at providing a consultation response on the minimum energy efficiency standards. So the closing date for that is the 30th of December. So that's going to come around very, very quickly. So we're going to try and pull something together as a national ALIO, and then we'll send that round regionally as well, so that you can see what's happening on that one. In addition, we are also looking to develop a series of toolkits to try and support local authorities. We're very aware that a lot of local authorities are in the process of doing a lot of bidding at the moment for funds, part of it around sort of COVID support and supporting the wider economy, and the challenge that can be for particularly the smaller local authorities. So we're going to look to supply a series of toolkits to local authorities to help with that, ranging from how to write a bid for LADs, for example, looking at procurement, looking at HECA reporting, what that should look like, and really trying to help members as much as possible and delivering that. In LADS 1, so the Local Authority Delivery Scheme, which is, for those people that aren't aware, it's part of the Green Home Voucher Scheme. So this is for local authority delivery. So there was a bidding round in the summer, and we had, I think in the Midlands, I think there's probably 5 successful bids. There's also just literally closed on Friday another bidding round for LADS 1B. Gotta love the catchy title. So that is for delivery of energy efficiency measures, predominantly low carbon measures. So we're looking at low carbon heating, so heat pumps, and then insulation measures, so loft, cavity, external wall, those sort of types of measures. So there's another plethora of bids that have gone in for that. That equates to about £200 million in total for those 2 rounds. And I know Ellen's going to talk about LADS 2 after coffee, so I won't mention that one. But it's really about making sure the support's there for the local authorities in delivering these sort of funding rounds. That's one of the key things we really want to try and focus on from an ALIO perspective. The other area we've really been looking at is really, what's going on across the Midlands. That's one of the things we're really conscious of, is trying to share that best practice, the good things that are going on out there. So we're really trying to promote that. And so I've started by just giving you a brief overview of what some of the members are doing across the West Midlands. Probably the big thing for the West Midlands at the moment is a piece of work the Combined Authority are doing, which is looking at a proposal to deliver fuel poverty across the Midlands called Warm Homes Save Lives. You've probably heard me talk about it before. So they're really looking to have a final proposal ready by Christmas. So the next couple of weeks, we're sort of finalising the process of that. It's made up of a number of key working groups looking at this agenda area, sort of looking somewhere in the region of about a £50 million spend. So it's a combination of all the funding that's out there, plus potentially eco going forward as to whatever that may look like, but how that can come back into the region, really to try and target energy efficiency measures in the Midlands, and really looking at job creation across the region as well. So there's different groups that are looking at that. So there's a cross-cutting theme, which is sort of the skills, customer engagement, finance. So there is 6 working groups at the moment, all looking, beavering away about what's needed to actually get this to happen, how this is going to work. And there's really 2 sides of it. There's the key fuel poverty side, which I've sort of talked about, wanted to mention here. But there's also a large-scale retrofit programme, which is really looking at that scaling up to really deliver some of those net zero targets that we're looking at going forward, and how the 2 interlink together, really to ensure that we are not impacting on fuel poor customers while we're trying to deliver these sort of programmes. So that's one of the key areas that's of work that's happening at the moment. I know many of you are probably already involved in it. But if anyone is interested, then for those of you would like to find out more, then Rosemary Coyne at SHAP has been dealing heavily in that, or you can always email myself and I can put you in touch with the relevant person that you need to speak to. But it's been led by the Combined Authority, this piece of work. So as you can see there, there's a variety of different steering groups, and it's the Warm Home Save Lives is the key one that we're looking at, which, as you can see there, is led by Shap there and Rosemary, for many of you that know Rosemary. So another really exciting project that's just being relaunched is Keeping Coventry Warm. So I just wanted to talk about some of the things that the members are doing, the Alio membership are doing. So the council just procured a new energy advice service to deliver energy advice and physical interventions across the city. It's a really extensive programme of measures: heating, insulation measures, advice on heating systems, tariffs, warm home discounts, property services registers, grants, whether they be the council's own funding or whether they be grants through the energy company obligation or grants from other organisations such as Agility Eco. I think Lorraine's going to talk a little bit about that later. And that's funded through the City Council and through the public health teams there. Really exciting scheme and really making a difference. And public health have been really central to the getting that off the ground and really making sure that we're keeping people's homes warmer. The city itself, it's got just over 12% of households affected by fuel poverty. It's got a huge number of LOSOAs, where over 30% of homes are affected by fuel poverty. And obviously, it really is impacting those that are very young and elderly. And obviously with the whole COVID situation, it's even more of a challenge than it has ever been before. So it's a very exciting scheme. So if anyone is interested, there's a couple of contacts on there. So Rosie and Angela are the sort of key project managers delivering the information, advice and guidance. And then Joe there's delivering the sort of physical measures. So if you come across householders in need of some physical intervention measures, so heating, wall insulation, etc., then just ping an email to Joe on that email there. And then another scheme that's just in the process of launching at the moment, so there'll be some press going out with support from the Combined Authority over the next couple of weeks. So Warmer Homes West Midlands, so it's a new scheme with funding from the Energy Savings Trust Redress programme. So it's going to be covering the Combined Authority area, so really sort of pulling those areas that haven't got current provision, really looking at energy advice, income maximisation, small measures, on-roll referrals, full measures as well. That's run through Acton Energy and March's Energy Agency, and there's a free phone number that's going to be launched for that as well, which actually is live at the moment. But if people are interested or have got pockets of fuel poverty that they're really aware of, where there's no or very little support there, then do give that number a call so you can get some support there as part of that programme. Not only is it about sort of a telephone advice line, but there's actually going to be community outreach workers on the ground working across the local communities to try and support householders and really address some of those challenges that are being faced at the moment. I think there is still some opportunities as well if people are interested. I think there's still one, maybe two posts available for community outreach workers. So if anyone is interested, do get in touch on that one as well there. In addition to that, there is members out there that are doing a huge amount of work. So, from the affordable warmth campaigns that are run by the likes of Dudley and Solihull up in Shropshire and Staffordshire, right the way through to schemes that have been set up really based around COVID relief support. So I know at the moment a number of counties and public health departments have been given funding through the DWP for COVID relief, which is predominantly around school meals. But I know a number of authorities are also looking at that wider piece as well. So really supporting families around energy. So partly around just the normal sort of traditional fuel vouchers, so the sort of prepayment ones, but also looking at how they can deliver schemes to support those people that aren't on prepayment meters. They're more traditional payers, for a better way of describing it, but also those that have oil and LPG who are paying huge amounts of money and are currently really concerned about how on earth they're going to top up their tank to get them through this winter. So there's certainly a number of authorities that are looking to set up schemes like that. So I know certainly Worcestershire is, Dudley's another one of those areas that's also looking to set up a similar scheme as well. So some really exciting stuff going on out there, which is really good to hear considering the challenges that we are all going through at the moment. So if anyone is interested in getting involved with Alio, then the Secretariat details are on there. So Angela runs the Secretariat for the Midlands. She also is the Secretariat for National Alio as well. So if you email Angela and you want to be on the national list and the regional one as well, she'll make sure you're put onto there. And that means you will get emails of what's going on nationally and bulletins of updates, and also an invite to any sort of Alio meetings that are going forward. And also the fact that we are going to start looking at doing quite a lot of consultations around BECO, the catchily titled Beyond Eco, and obviously the MEES, and also really trying to get a feel from local authorities and others around the flex side of things as well. So that's a bit of a gallop through the world of Alio at the moment. So if there's any questions, then do feel free to shout now, or feel free to email us or contact myself there. And as I say, if any of those schemes that I've just talked about, if you're interested in getting involved or you want to know more, then please do just email and we'll make sure you are put in touch with the right person.
Thank you, Rachel. Does anybody have any questions they want to put to Rachel? Okay, I'm particularly excited about the Warm Homes Cost Lives programme. The prospects of having £50 million in the region for retrofit and the same amount to address fuel poverty, or at least to attend to fuel poverty issues amongst the population, is just fantastic. Okay, one thing I should have mentioned, which I put on the chat there, if you have any questions that you think of afterwards or during the course of things, stick them on the chat and we'll try to address those when we can.
Yeah, I did have one for Rachel actually.
Yeah, come on, Brent.
On the chat, just a quick one. Rachel, how many RSLs have got energy managers or anyone of that kind of role within their organisations out of your experience in the Midlands?
Well, very few have got very specific energy related ones, particularly the smaller RSLs. And there's a number of out there that have been applying for the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. Yeah. And it really became evident, I'm not going to name any associations, that wouldn't be appropriate, but it really became evident that even some very large associations hadn't got the knowledge base there to be able to put together some of those bids, and we're having to go to outside consultants. So it's really, really key. Actually, it's good that you mentioned that, Brett, because actually there's a piece of work that SHAP's doing, trying to work with housing associations to really look at that particular agenda area. So if there is any housing associations or council with their own stock on the line, that's one of the areas you really want to look at, is that what are the barriers for you achieving that net zero carbon target? What do you need from central government so you could put those sort of bids in? What data are you lacking? So I think everyone's got quite a lot of EPC data, but what more do you need to really be able to analyse that data to get to better outcomes? So that's an area that I know Rosemary's looking at quite a lot of detail in. So if anyone's interested, then give us a shout and we can really start to drill that back down, because a lot of it's about feeding back up the central government so they are aware of the challenges, because as you rightly say, Brett, there is very few specific energy officers out there in housing associations, and even in local authorities now they are few and far between. They used to be called HECA officers, so Home Energy and Conservation Act, and there used to be a HECA officer in every authority. Now you're probably lucky to have 0.2 of a HECA officer. So it's only really the larger authorities that perhaps will have a HECA officer. I think you're one of the very few, Brett, that actually have dedicated officers looking at sort of fuel poverty agenda and the sustainability agenda, whereas many others have very little, or it's part of someone's wider job. It normally sits within housing, and it's normally part of someone that's trying to deal with homelessness and disabled facilities grants. So there's definitely some resource issue there, and that's one of the things I think I'm very aware that the combined authority, as part of the Warm Homes Saves Lives, is really looking at, is that a chunk of that 50 million is about putting some investment back into local authorities to support those officers, or provide that funding for that support there.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. That was really good. I mean, it was a gallop, yeah, but there's loads of stuff in there. Just so everybody knows, and I'll repeat it again later, all these slides will be circulated. They'll appear on our website very soon after this forum. And of course, if anybody has any particular questions to presenters or others in the room that they want to put afterwards, then you can always drop them to me as an email and I can forward them on. That's absolutely fine. One of the purposes of this forum is to put people in touch with each other. So what you don't say now, you are allowed to say in between forums, and we'd actually encourage this kind of connectivity, if you like. Okay, so moving on a bit then, I'd like to invite Zoe from Citizens Advice Coventry. Hi Zoe.
Good
Are you
morning.
able to share your slides?
We're about to find out. Let's see. I am screen sharing. Does
Marvellous.
that look good?
Looks great to me.
Okay, we'll risk it and press on. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. My name's Zoe. I work at Coventry Citizens Advice. I run the Coventry Frontline Network, and we're a local partner of a national organisation called the Frontline Network, which is Martin in the Fields in London. I think, as Andy was saying, these kind of forums are all about connecting and building networks. So I thought it'd be a good chance to get our network into the wider domain and invite some contact from local agencies who will hopefully find it useful. The Frontline Network is here to support workers from the public, statutory or voluntary sectors, anyone who works on the front line with people who are experiencing homelessness. And when we talk about homelessness, we're not sort of just referring to the tip of the iceberg, street homelessness, people in temporary accommodation, people accessing statutory homelessness services from local authorities. We're also looking at people, anyone essentially who is vulnerably housed, who might be in unsuitable accommodation due to health needs, who might be struggling with their housing costs and building up rent arrears or being threatened with eviction for whatever reason. So we really do sort of define it quite widely, and hopefully a number of your agencies would kind of fall into that kind of sector, really, where you're seeing clients who are vulnerable in a number of different ways. I think we've already seen how sort of fuel poverty will overlap with universal credit issues, welfare benefits, and wider issues out there as well. So the network was set up to kind of work with the front line to take your ideas and expertise, really recognising that the knowledge of what works in many sectors really is that the knowledge is with the people who are on the front line doing the job. So we're here to find ways to help agencies to support people's work. And part of that offer, we offer funding, community and resources. So this is all available across the UK. We work nationwide. Some of the funds that we have available are for agencies themselves. So we have a training fund, which can help with training costs for people who work on the front line. We have an ideas board, which is funding of up to £10,000 to try out new ideas, new ways of working. If there's something that you want to trial, that might be worth looking into. In more normal times, we have a shadowing fund where you can go and visit other agencies across the country and learn from what they do. And there's also an events fund if you wanted to hold a one-off event to cover a particular topic. For obvious reasons, they're suspended at the moment, just with restrictions on travel and mixing. There is funding available directly for clients as well, which I'll touch on later on. And we're really here to kind of build a community, to share resources, to pick up best practice, share all those things that you've already tried and see what works and what doesn't, and just to build a network, as it says, really. One of our key focuses is supporting the well-being of frontline workers, which has been, again, as you can imagine, sort of a high on the agenda this year. The high caseloads that people carry, the stressful nature of the work that people do, particularly where that's with vulnerable clients or people with multiple disadvantage and a lot of sort of previous trauma perhaps in their life. So we do have a strong focus on supporting well-being, and there's lots of resources there to support people. Again, in more normal times, we would hold an annual conference, and generally every year there's been a very strong focus. There's been sort of afternoon sessions covering things like how to not take work home with you, reflective practice, kind of offloading those kind of traumatic, vicarious trauma experiences, and how to kind of avoid burnout and too much stress in the role. So that's definitely a sort of a key point of the network as well. which again is hopefully sort of relevant to a lot of different sectors and not just sort of narrow definition of homelessness workers. We're very keen to amplify the voice of the frontline. What we'd like to see is that whenever policy changes are made, that they're informed by the experience of those working on the front line. We recognise that people doing the day job don't always have the time and space to do some of that work. So hopefully we can be sort of a link back into policymakers in terms of consultations, whether that be local or national. We also run a national survey. So every year there's an opportunity for anyone on the front line to sort of tell us what's getting better, what's getting worse, what works, what changes you'd like to see. Terrible timing, it closed last week for this year, I'm afraid, but certainly keep an eye out. There'll be a report coming out from this year's reports, you know, to bring out some themes. The 2019 report was released this year for last year's survey and drew out the kind of themes that you might expect. The affordability of housing within sort of benefit rates, the 5-week wait of universal credit, and the sort of you know, the frontline well-being, the way that contracts can be quite short and how stressful that can be for frontline workers when you haven't got that job security in the role. So obviously we have a website. It's the very catchy frontlinenetwork.org.uk. You can see from there we've got various tabs covering some of the topics that I've mentioned. So we have the funding tab there, community and resources and news and views, so sort of blogs from the front line, different services kind of sharing what they've tried and what's worked and then sharing best practice. The final tab on there is the Vickers Relief Fund. I don't know whether many people may have accessed that fund previously. If not, it's actually kind of the source of the frontline network. So the Vickers Relief Fund, you don't have to be a vicar to apply or to receive the funding, but it's a national fund that can provide grants directly to clients, where that may either help prevent eviction or to help people move on into more settled accommodation. So you can see from there some of the things that that fund can cover. I know service charge arrears can sometimes be difficult to fund. Rent in advance, things like getting identification documents for people if you need fees to cover that. So hopefully that might be a useful fund to be aware of if you are dealing with clients who are facing sort of housing cost issues, whether that be in their current accommodation or where they're trying to move on to somewhere more settled. There's also a video of frequently asked questions. I'll share these links. Obviously the links are in the slide pack and I'll drop a link in the chat after this just to give you some of the links directly. So as I mentioned, Coventry Citizens Advice is a local partner of the national network. So in terms of what that means for my role, I'm here really to kind of connect agencies who are working with anybody, you know, sort of vulnerably housed or experiencing any form of homelessness based in Coventry, but covering the wider Midlands area. So that's the combined authority area and surrounding regions. Obviously Coventry and Warwickshire sort of naturally fit together as well. Part of my role is to hold events, and again in those back in the mists of time where we used to hire meeting rooms and have tea and coffee and biscuits, we would hold events for frontline workers, certainly a quarterly forum. So every 3 months we'd have sort of a main meeting for people just to meet up, to get away from the day job, to talk to each other and connect about what's going on in the role. I think sometimes we find that particularly in sort of smaller agencies, you might only have one person who deals with the housing issues. So it's quite nice for people to connect with their peers and people who do similar roles sort of in other organisations as well. The kind of things that we look at, we might invite the council along to talk about their statutory homelessness services. We would look at consultations about local and national changes, sessions on universal credit and housing costs. We've recently looked at the EU settlement scheme and how that's going to impact on people's entitlement to housing support and housing costs. We held an event on digital exclusion quite recently. So hopefully you can see that some of those issues are they're not sort of a very narrow definition of homelessness per se. There are a lot of sort of wide-reaching issues that all intersect and kind of will overlap with work that people do with vulnerable clients. We've moved all of those meetings online, as you may expect. So since March, we've been holding everything through Teams. And the kind of people that we welcome to our meetings, we have council staff, outreach teams, housing providers, including social landlords, advice agencies, food banks, women's support services, and we are open, as I say, to people not just within Coventry, but we've welcomed people from Birmingham, Nuneaton, Warwickshire areas and beyond. In between those meetings, we have a newsletter, which we've tried to keep to 2 a month. You'll be well aware how many updates there have been throughout the year in terms of sort of housing news, housing costs, welfare benefits, how DWP manage their services, things such as, you know, how to top up prepayment meters when people are shielding, how to access money when you haven't been able to sort of visit the bank, all those kind of practical issues. It's been, as you know, it's been quite a year. But our sort of regular newsletter, we try and pick up what's happening locally and nationally, specifically in homelessness. So news from Homeless Link, the membership agency, from Shelter and Crisis and the big campaigning groups. We like to share training and events, and I know certainly the NEA team in Coventry link us up with a lot of the sort of fuel poverty and fuel debt events and training that they've held. So we're here to share specifically low cost and free events. But obviously our training fund is there to look into as well if training costs are a barrier. We like to share consultations with people and pull together some responses for them. We can advertise vacancies to our members. And as I say, sort of COVID updates, those benefit changes, eviction bans, and specifically local COVID support, so accessing sort of emergency food supplies and all those kind of community responses that we saw, particularly during the first lockdown. Just to let you know, we do actually have 2 vacancies for new partners to join us nationwide. We're particularly keen to continue the work that was started in South Yorkshire, where the current partner can't continue that role. I don't know how likely it is that another Midlands agency would be sort of brought aboard as a partner, but I know that a number of agencies will have connections and may work in lots of different areas. So just a call out if you know a good agency who deals sort of directly with clients on a frontline basis with a sort of homelessness focus in some respect, please do share the link with your contacts and spread the word. Yeah, this is my final slide. So really just how to get involved with the network. If what we do sounds as if it could support your work, whether that be accessing funding directly for clients, accessing our training funds, using the wellbeing resources, or sort of sharing best practice, then certainly have a look at our site. We have the national website, so frontlinenetwork.org.uk. We've got a national newsletter where you can sign up for those updates. I have my It's called Coventry Frontline Network Newsletter, but obviously it's going to cover a lot of West Midlands issues and national ones as well. We're on Twitter, so there's the SMITF Frontline account and myself as my personal account. And certainly feel free, if that's, if there's still questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now, or do get in touch with me. And again, I'll drop my email address into the chat if anything comes to mind after today. I think that's it from me. Been a whistle stop tour, and I'm thinking about my cup of tea and biscuits that we've got due in a few minutes. So yeah, over to you if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Okay, well, thank you, Zoe. I thought that was really brilliant. Particularly, it's particularly good to see that there's a concentration, or if you like, a focus on the experiences of being a frontline worker. Yeah, I mean, not taking work home with you. How many of us listen to that? Well, you know, but seriously, and also recognizing that the people who work on the coalface actually are the people with the best knowledge, and often can feed into, if they have a network, if you like, through bodies such as yourselves, where they can feed into policy, then that would be fantastic. Yes. Because often, you know, we've all experienced it. You feel like you're crying in the wilderness when policies are made which don't seem to tie in with the reality on the ground that you see. And so it's great that you're in charge of doing that kind of thing. I think that's brilliant.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, really free relief. And I love the Speakers Relief Fund. It's something I've not heard of, but if it's going to provide a little bit of a leg up for people who need to get into good accommodation or to find a deposit for a house, that kind of thing, I mean,
It is.
money
It's
for that
about
sort of stuff is really hard to come by.
Yeah, it's about breaking that sort of vicious circle, really, you know, that people do just need, you know, it's 300, 400 pounds, it's that kind of figure, you know, but it can make all the difference to somebody accessing somewhere more settled, or even covering something like hoarding, clear up action for hoarders, you know, anything that will help somebody stay in the accommodation that they're in.
Yeah, that's great.
Suitable. Yeah, so happy to. It's a lovely job to have, to be, you know, providing support in that way.
Well, you're looking like you're enjoying it.
Yes.
I just have one other question. I know that there's legislation coming in very soon regarding protecting tenants who may or may not be evicted, Section 21 stuff. Do you have access to legal advice for tenants, or do you refer on to other organisations?
I'm not aware that we have direct access ourselves. One thing I would recommend is NHAS, so the National Homelessness Advice Service is run by Shelter, and that's that can support advisors, you know, in sort of providing advice on how to interpret some guidance, or to, you know, to look at individual cases. So that might be something to look into. But yeah, and we're not. It's kind of I suppose that the way that the network operates is that we support other agencies. We don't sort of directly deliver services to clients, if you like, but certainly there are various services. I'll drop the NHAS link in the chat as well. That'd be great.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Well, thanks, Zoe. That's really informative, very useful. Fantastic. Okay, well, I think we should all join Zoe in a tea and biscuits at this point. So can I ask that we reconvene in 10 minutes? That's 11:20. And then we'll have Ellen Cooper-Tiedemann talking about the LAD Phase 2 Green Home grants, and then Laura Towler with news from Auriga about referrals, grants and emergency fuel vouchers, followed by a word from Ajiz Eco, Walsall Housing and Competition Council about local things. So thanks very much for that, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Well, welcome back, everybody, after a hopefully refreshing small break. We've got Ellen Cooper-Tiedemann coming on in a sec from the Midlands Energy Hub, talking about the local authorities delivery phase 2, which overlaps and dovetails into other things that other people have spoken about. So it's all very good, really, because we're kind of reinforcing some of the things that are happening locally, which is brilliant. Anyway, are you able to share your slides? You have slides, Ellen?
Yes, I'm just going to try now.
I did put a thing on chat, by the way, saying that other forums have had. Yes, I have. Thanks, Ellen. Other forums have had a presentation from Bays, which I shall circulate in an email, the link in the next day or two. Sorry, Ellen.
That's
right,
okay.
so without any further ado, can I ask people to please mute their sound, because we're getting a bit of feedback at the moment, and I'll, without further ado, pass you on to Ellen. Thanks, Ellen.
Hi. So I think the most important update is that the deadline for delivery for phase 2 is now December 21. So the hub is revising its approach to enable works to start sooner in the new year. As an update, this is our proposed delivery model, and we are still looking to allocate funding rather than it being a competition for phase 2. So we're hoping to be able to provide the letters of award of the allocations to local authorities in the new year, and to open an expression of interest in February for local authorities to confirm what level of funding they wish to take forward. And we're then, as a difference from phase 1B, looking at allowing some funding in advance of submitting a full bid to be able to do the survey works as part of the PAS 2035 compliance, which involves a retrofit coordinator. And then we'll be looking at creating some additional regional support. And thank you all for submitting your responses to the survey that we circulated. And we're reviewing those to kind of understand the type and level of support required, and looking to procure regional support across all the LEP areas to offer that additional advice and customer journey, and then separately creating 2 DPS systems which will provide support for both procuring the types of specialist work required as part of PAS 2035 and also contractors in order to deliver in the timescale. And this is kind of a high-level overview of the expected delivery. And that's my update. So does anyone have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing because I can't see everybody. Take that as a no.
I have a question, Ellie. It's Rachel from Alio, Axon Energy, whichever hat I'm wearing. When you talked about the regional support for the customer journey, are you looking at sort of an east-west split or the whole of the wider region?
So we're looking at procuring per LEP level. So that'll be
LEP level. Okay. Thank you.
Would you mind sharing your slide again, please, Ellie?
Yeah, of course.
So, Ellie, what was the timescale for procurement? Sorry.
So it depends on what stage, because some local authorities will need to procure the specialist support to do the surveys. So we're looking at having the DPSs definitely in place for the new financial year, hopefully the specialist support in advance of that. We're just trying to get final guidance from BEIS in order for us to be able to put the tenders out.
Right. Okay, and what about when it gets to the stage for the installers?
So depending on when you've submitted your full proposal, if you've already got a contract in place that complies with the rules, then you'll be allowed to continue that contract. And if you need to procure, then the DPS will be available from the new financial year. So if you submit your proposal by then the allocation would enable you to start procurement straight away in the new financial year. If you choose to delay submitting the proposal till the end of June, then you have until the end of July. Well, hopefully before, to be able to procure the necessary support. Because this time around, there's been a stipulation that there's a delivery target in September. So in terms of meeting that target, we would hope that procurement would be in place by July in order to be able to meet the delivery required in the timescales.
Okay, thank you.
And what's the take up been like on this? Is it going to be fully subscribed, do you think?
So the idea with this is that any local authority that has a statutory responsibility for housing would be receiving an allocation. So that's different to phase 1A and B, which required local authorities to compete for the funding.
I see.
So hopefully.
When you say statutory responsibility, what are you referring to? Actually have housing stock?
No, I just mean because obviously some county councils that aren't unitary, there's 2 tiers, so it would go to the district or borough.
Or in this case, I'm talking for Coventry City here, so kind of unitary.
Yes, then you would get your allocation.
Right, and how's that allocation calculated? Is it based on percentage of properties below certain rating levels, or?
We're just finalising the allocation with BEIS.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because as you know, we've put in for 1A and 1B, so I'm interested in terms of the scale of what we got to do in Coventry is enormous. So any penny makes a difference. It's pretty awful. So yeah, so it's for me, it's just knowing what the kind of figures we're talking about in terms of what kind of domain are we.
So I can tell you that the allocation for the whole of the Midlands is 59.95 million.
59.95, and we've got how many authorities to dish that out amongst?
I believe it's 65.
60, so it's not much.
If it was equally split, so
it's going to be less than it's going to be likely to be less than a million or something, I suppose. Well, it depends on the size. Yeah.
So that's what we're looking at. Is it are we doing it locally or another? So
right, so it could be like 1.5 million to something less around, I would think, if you think his size of authority, number of properties and stuff like that. Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's a guesstimate there, total guess.
And I think that's the key thing for us, is we want to tell your allocations as soon as possible. So we're just trying to finalise everything, guidance and MOU, so we can share that information with you, so that you have as long as possible before the expression of interest open to have that conversation.
Yeah. So so receive a letter of allocation January time, early New Year.
That's the plan.
Okay. I just need to get colleagues with our heads around it, because we've got 2 programs, so I just need to does this stitch how does it fit in with all the different organizations that are involved in it? Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's useful. Any kind of procurement rules attached to this, by the way, just out of interest?
So it will have to be compliant with PAS 2035 and openly in compliance with state aid. We're just waiting for a final guidance on phase 2, which is also one of the reasons we can't provide the allocations as yet, because there might be variation in terms of what can and can't be put in capitalisation or admin budget compared to the phase 1.
Okay. Yeah.
So there will be some variation, which we'll make clear when we do provide the information in your allocation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Helen. I mean, a question has been raised on, am I on mute? No. A question's been raised on the chat. What about local authorities who have no homes because they've all been transferred to housing authorities? And Rachel's answered it's all tenure.
Yes,
but goes to local authority. Yeah.
Yeah, and owner-occupiers don't require match funding.
No.
The landlords require a third contribution.
Yeah, is that going to be a challenge, you think, to landlords?
Yes.
Sorry, rhetorical question. Okay. Well, look, thanks for that, Ellen. That's really useful. Thank you very much. And any other questions that you think of as we go along, stick them in the chat, and we can always go back to what's been spoken before. Okay. Lorraine Gums from Agility Eco. Are you there? Oh.
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. Sorry, I thought you were still eating biscuits.
No, I wasn't eating biscuits. I'm still here. So
Great to see you.
Yeah, nice to see all you guys as well. So I'm just going to try and just share a couple of slides, if that's okay. So bear with me just a sec. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Brilliant. Let's just go. Right, I think most people know me, but I just wanted to give you guys just a bit of an update about what we're doing at Agility Eco and some of the affordable warmth schemes that we're running at the moment in the area. So just a quick background to Agility Eco. It was set up several years ago by a couple of guys that worked for British Gas. So predominantly to deal with the eco side of things, but we do now have some community initiative schemes. So I kind of always explain it that it's kind of split, the business is kind of split 2 ways. So we have the eco side of things, which, to be honest, I don't have an awful lot to do with. So there we sort of manage sort of millions pounds worth of eco funding. So we can, and that tends to be distributed via our a framework of contractors that we work with across the country. So we've got those there. But then I work on what we call the community initiative schemes. So we work obviously with local authorities, housing providers and charities, and I'm really pleased that some of our partners are on the call this morning. Obviously we get all of our funding from the energy companies at the moment, but then we do have and then we actually they fund all of our services, and then we just deliver all of our services. It is a national scheme, but I'm based in Birmingham, so the Midlands is my stomping ground. So I sort of manage most of the partners in the Midlands. So on a local area, we work with March's Energy Agency and Act on Energy, because they deliver some of our energy advice schemes. And then we work with quite a lot of local authorities and housing associations in the Midlands area as well. So very briefly, I'm just going to go through the different affordable warmth schemes that we've got on offer at the moment. So the one that you're probably all familiar with is LEAP, which is our telephone and home energy advice service. So any of you that were familiar with LEAP before would have known it as basically a pure home advice service. but due to COVID, we've had to change the service. So what we did at the end of March in lockdown 1 was that we actually just closed it all down, and then I spent the summer with my colleagues reinventing Leap as a telephone advice service. But we still do have the opportunity to do home energy advice visits. So it works the same as it's always worked. You know, you can refer residents into us, or they can self-refer themselves into us. The only difference now is that we do the bulk of the advice over the phone. So we do the stuff, that you're all familiar with. So checking tariffs, checking if people bills are high, doing a little bit of fuel debt. We do income maximisation, do a little bit of work with water tariffs. Just all the norm really. But if at the end of that call there is still a need to do a home visit, then we are still offering home visits. We're making sure that they're as COVID safe as possible. So we're just limiting them to no more than 30 to 45 minutes. Obviously, we've got our pre-COVID, screening questions. We're wearing face coverings, we're wiping surfaces down. But it's really just to pick up on any of the things that we can't deal with over the phone. We can still offer that service. Particularly because we do still have the small measures. So, the free light bulbs, radiator panels, TV power downs. So if residents, we can now post these out to residents, or they can get delivered to them. But if they can't, if they're not able to fit them and they still want them, then we will still go out and fit them for them. So the other thing that we've got on offer in the Midlands is our Connected for Warmth scheme. So this is a scheme for any local authorities that don't have an existing first-time central heating scheme funded by, the Affordable Warmth programme, the Warm Homes Fund programme. So if they don't already have one of those schemes, then they can tap into ours. So it's only for the Cadent area. So it's aimed at residents that don't have an existing central heating scheme. So it could just be that they've already got a gas supply, or they've got a gas fires, or it could be that they're all electric, so they've got storage heaters or panel heaters, or they've got solid fuel. So as long as they're eligible for the scheme, we will then try and fund them to get a first-time central heating system fitted free of charge. And then we've got HEART, which is our white goods replacement scheme. So I'm sure that you probably realise this is a really popular scheme at the moment. So HEART is based on anybody that has a LEAP core is eligible for our HEART scheme. And what it will do is it will replace old inefficient white goods. So it will be things like electric cookers, fridges, fridge freezers, washing machines. So the appliance needs to be about at least 8 years old, but there is a little bit of common sense here. So if the appliance is sort of, 6 or 7 years old, but the seal's gone on the door or the icebox is broken, then we can look to repair, we can look to replace it. It is a replacement scheme. So you just need to bear in mind that they need to have a white goods there in place. We don't do what we call first time white goods. And the appliances, although they are A-rated appliances, they are not the top of the range models. So if somebody's got, a lovely big, American fridge freezer, they're not going to get one of those. It'll just be a standard 50-50 fridge freezer. Or if they've got a washing machine that's got 1,000,001 programs, again, it'll be quite a standard appliance. So that the funding for that scheme is in place at the moment. So HEART only tends to operate over the autumn and winter. So it will end at the end of March. There is plenty of money in the pot at the moment, and residents can have they can have more than one appliance. So they could have a washing machine, a cooker, and a fridge freezer if needs be. But it is first come, first served. So if you know anybody that you think would benefit from this, please refer them to LEAP, and then we can pick it up when we do our LEAP call. The other scheme that we offer is ECHO, which is our boiler repair or replacement scheme. So this is only open to owner-occupiers. And so the boiler does need to be broken. So it has to be a broken down boiler. And the resident needs to be on eco benefits. So they need to be on means tested or disability benefits, or meet the flex criteria for that local authority. And again, it's really straightforward scheme. The next slide will tell you how you can refer people in. There's different ways you can refer them in for the Midlands. But basically, the idea behind this is within about 2 weeks, they should have a working heating system. So the contractor will first of all try and repair the boiler, but if they can't repair it, then they will get a new boiler. The only thing you need to bear in mind with this scheme, as I said, the boiler has to be broken. So if the engineer turns up and the boiler's working, they will just walk away. And the other thing is that it is a boiler repair or replacement scheme. So we are still getting referrals, and we do still come across people that have got 30, 40-year-old boilers. And this probably isn't the best scheme to refer them to us for, because the funding is only there to replace the boiler. So if their boiler is, 30, 40 years old, it probably means that, the pipework and the radiators are that age as well. So we wouldn't be able to replace the whole of the system. So we'd have to look for another way to actually get them a new gas central heating system. I mentioned obviously that Agility Eco has, the main part of the business used to be the eco side of things. So we are still offering obviously eco measures. Again, residents can self-refer, or you can refer them to us via our online portal, which is called My Eco Home. It's a really straightforward portal whereby it just asks a series of questions. So the type of property, who owns the property, and then at the end of it, it will just say whether or not the property needs any eco measures, and somebody from our team will give them a call and see what we can do to help. And then the final thing that we've got, which isn't probably most applicable for the Midlands, but because most of the Midlands area is covered by LEAP, but we have also now got a new telephone advice service for all of England and Wales, which is called Connect for Help. So this scheme operates anywhere where we don't offer our LEAP service. And the main difference really with this scheme is it's just purely that we don't offer any home energy advice here. So all the advice is just done over the phone. But what we can still do is refer the residents on for any other schemes and any other schemes that are in the area. But it is a nationwide scheme, so it covers the whole of England and Wales. So just really quickly how you can make referrals to the scheme. So for the LEAP scheme, we've got a website, which is applyforleap.org.uk. And when you go on there, you will be able to see what the eligibility criteria is. I mean, the eligibility criteria is really wide. It's if people are on any benefits, if they're on a low income, or if they've got any health conditions, they should be eligible for LEAP. So you can either refer online, or you can phone our free phone number. The office at the moment is open from 9:15 till 7 o'clock in the evening, and on Saturday mornings as well, 9 till 12. And LEAP will be running up until the end of March. So then we've also got Connected for Warmth. So again, it's a simple form that you can apply to online, or you can call on our free phone number. Again, it will just ask some questions. So if you go on the Connected for Warmth website, you'll just see what the eligibility is and how the scheme works. And again, so residents can self-refer themselves to this scheme, or you can make a referral. And there's a free phone number as well. So for Heart, we do have a website which just explains how the scheme works, but unfortunately residents can't self-refer to Heart. So these referrals will have to be via LEAP. So as long as somebody is able to have a LEAP call from us, they will be eligible for Heart. Again, we've got a website for Echo, but again, residents can't self-refer to Echo. So it either has to be via LEAP. So again, if they have a LEAP call from us, or Connect for Help call from us, or or they can contact one of our partners. So the partners in the Midlands that can actually make these referrals on residents' behalf, so Act on Energy, Marches Energy Agency, and Catalyst Mutual. So you can so residents can contact them direct to make a referral. And then obviously you've just got the website there for My Eco Home. So again, as I said, it's a straightforward portal, or you can just call in on a free phone number. And finally, you've just got the contact details there for Connect for Help. So again, as I said, that is across the whole of England and Wales, outside of where we're offering LEAP. And residents can just self-refer, or you can refer people on there via the application form or via the free phone number. And that is me done. So I know it's very brief, because I know there's a few others that need to talk as well, but does anybody have any questions about those at all?
I got a question, Lorraine, if I may. Are landlords, private landlords, in any way able to key into this?
So private landlords can private landlords are eligible for Connected for Warmth, and obviously for My Eco Home, because obviously they can have some eco measures, but we can't help them with Eco, I'm afraid. So for the boilers, for those, it would be the landlord's responsibility. But what we do ask is if the landlords want to take advantage of that, by all means they can call us, but really the referrals need to come from their tenants. So we would have the conversation with their tenants first of all, and then we'd contact the landlords to get permission to do any work.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Anybody else got any questions?
Okay, if you've got a
Right.
minute, can you put those links on the chat so people can copy and paste them?
Yep, I will do. Yeah,
Thank
no
you very
problem.
much.
Will do.
That's great. Thank you, Lorraine. That's really brilliant. Now, Paul Dockerell, you there? Or it'd be
Hi,
Connie, in fact.
and it's going to be me.
Sorry, Connie. I knew you were Paul in disguise. Sorry, I missed out on that one.
I don't know whether you'd be pleased being looking like me, but
Okay, so this is Connie from Walsall Housing Group, and I've got down the title is Health, Hope and Happiness.
absolutely, there's not
That's
a lot
a
of
Christmas
that about
message
at
if
the
ever I
moment.
heard one. Okay.
Yeah. So
Thanks, Danny. Do you have slides?
no, not
Okay.
that technical. I was just
fine.
asked by Paul to do a 5-minute overview of what we're doing around fuel poverty and the broader sort of energy efficiency agenda. So I'm Connie Jennings, I'm Head of Health and Wellbeing for WHG, and I work closely with my colleague Paul, who's Director of Asset Management. Between the two of us, we work on the fuel poverty agenda. I was going to talk to you today about the H factor, which is my new health and wellbeing strategy. And the H factor is striving for health, hope and happiness for people. And I don't think that that's any more poignant than it is today, because that's in very short supply at the moment. So health and wellbeing in WHG, we're part of the Integrated Care Partnership, which is a fairly new framework to work within health and other statutory agencies. And it's unusual for housing to be involved either strategically or operationally within ICP. So we're really pleased about that. So the health and wellbeing strategy, the H factor, it's got 4 corporate aims. So reducing loneliness and isolation, using social prescribing to tackle the wider determinants of health, reducing the impact of poverty on children and families, and helping our older customers to age well and to have disability-free life. At the moment, if you're aged over 65 and over and you live in social housing, you're spending around 34% of your later years having poor health or disability. So it's really around quality of life initiatives. So around fuel poverty, myself and Paul have worked hard to set up a steering group within Walsall that will look to tackle fuel poverty. Lorraine's part of that group and a key player in that sort of work that we're doing. We've also got local energy suppliers, Walsall Council, obviously ourselves, and people in the community voluntary sector involved in that. So the social prescribing programme, the H factor, what we've discovered, we launched it in June, and what we've discovered is the majority of people we're working with have got an issue around poverty, and quite a lot of them have got an issue around fuel poverty. So working with HACT, which is an innovation agency in social housing, we engaged in the energy redress scheme this autumn and early winter, ensuring people had access to money off fuel vouchers. We're also working with the co-op to ensure people get the best energy offer that's available to them with their circumstances. And through the work that Paul's doing, we're also heavily involved in a retrofit scheme to ensure that our properties come up to the required standard. So if anybody wants to know more about how we're using social prescribing to impact on poverty in general, but obviously fuel poverty as well, please let me know in the chat and I'll send you some details. And if anybody wants to know about the work that Paul's doing around the retrofit scheme, please let me know. And just for a bit of hope, we've developed an initiative called Kindness Bags. So Barclays very kindly gave us £100,000 out of their COVID relief fund. And we're using that to distribute bags of kindness, and some of them they're themed. So we've got health and wellbeing, we've got reducing poverty and hardship, we've got employment and training and digital inclusion focused bags. So they're a bag with a theme, and it's great to have £100,000 of clean money that we can actually just bring a bit of hope and joy to people, particularly at this time. That's me done.
Thank you, Connie. That was very interesting. I'm not sure what a definition of clean money is. Does this imply that otherwise it's usually dodgy money?
Yeah, I always remember when I started in this world 30 years ago, somebody told me it was clean money, and I did think that, but it just means we can spend it on anything we like, and we haven't even got any grant conditions, which is just brilliant.
Fantastic. No laundering required. I like it. Okay, does anybody else have any questions to put to Connie, or certainly use the chat facility if need be? Okay, well, thanks for that, Connie. I'd like to introduce now Brett Willers from Coventry City Council, who is Head of Climate Change and Sustainability, and he's going to talk about the social housing retrofit programme. Over to you, Brett.
Yeah, try and get my camera back.
Yeah, a lot of people have gone off camera. I'm not sure what's happening here.
Let's come back. Okay, now I'll try and get to share. So how do I connect my screen to yours so you can see the slides?
You should have a share screen button at the bottom of your picture there somewhere.
Bottom, got it. Thank you. See, this is someone that uses Teams a lot. I think this is it. This is it. Can you see what can you see now?
I can see a view of Coventry City behind you.
That's it. Oh, no, you're not seeing the screen. Okay.
No.
Let me try again. Hopefully you should have it.
Yes, that's got it now. Thanks, Paul.
It has, is it? Because I can't see it, but fine. That's good fun, isn't it? Right. Okay. I'll try and put it into. I can see it on here, but not what necessarily you're seeing. Okay. I've got luck. Yes, hopefully we're there. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the key thing. Actually, one of the early speakers covered quite a few points, so I will rush through some of the slides because she actually covered keeping Coventry warm. When we looked at some of the things you wanted to talk, you wanted a few snapshots. This is some of the work we're currently doing, which relates to kind of retrofit and support to households in need of guidance and support. And I think to put it into context, Coventry does have an issue in terms of fuel poverty, which is greater than the national average. And particularly if you look at some of our super output areas, you can talk about a third to a quarter of the areas, the houses within an area are actually in that affected in that way. So it's quite significant. There's some real hot spots across the city where we've got real issues to address. And the age of the housing stock is also a problem. There's a lot of solid wall insulation issues, which is, as everyone knows, is really difficult to address and to deal with. So we're looking at ways in which we can deal with that. We're also sort of mapping out the city in quite some detail. And we've got a partnership at the moment with the utility where we're looking at European Space Agency imagery as well to help do that, which is far more sophisticated than the original aerial thermal imaging stuff. So we're trying to get some picture on where to target, how to target, etc. And the scale of what we need to target is enormous. So as we know, sort of the issues around fuel poverty, high fuel costs, low income, and poor energy efficiency. So the areas where we can support actively, obviously trying to provide support for people in terms of improving the efficiency and affordable warmth for their homes. Also at the other end, in terms of our economic development department, trying to help people get jobs. And we're trying to make the connection between the two, in fact, as well, looking at the environmental technologies and development environmental technologies in the city, because Coventry's an unusual city. It's got the second highest number of patents in the UK. It's got a lot of innovation going on, a lot of which is focusing on the environmental agenda. So it's trying to see how we can help products be developed that help to employ people as well. So they kind of help people at the other end in terms of the income, how the opportunities that provides. And we have another initiative called the RESO, which is a regional energy systems operator project, which is funded by Innovate UK. And I mean, I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but it's one of its objectives is to reduce fuel costs. So that's the sort of council trying to address the issue from all three different angles. well, it's quite a challenge, as one can see. We know what the effects are in terms of health. It's pretty commonly established, and for that reason, our public health team are actively supporting the programme, are very involved in the work with colleagues in my team who are dealing with the energy efficiency side of things. And we know that the risks to various sort of disorders, particularly around mental health, around people with respiratory illnesses, and also addressing issues. Some of the issues when you're dealing with energy efficiency is also to be wary of the impact it has on ventilation and air circulation in a house, because while dealing one issue, you could create another. So it's important that we do actually look at that in the round. And it's well documented, NICE and others, and the King's Fund here, you know, for every £1 spent dealing with that issue, it equates to a £70 saving to the NHS. So it would be nice if we could get the NHS more focused on this. I mean, it's public health is not NHS, but we do work with NHS and in trying to get some understanding around how those issues can actually help people, for example, returning to home, they're vulnerable elderly and the like. So the city is about to embark on developing a new sustainable development strategy for the city and climate change. It's an ambitious task because it's not the council itself, it's actually the city. So it's a strategy for the city. So it's got to get, the objective is to get collective ownership for the sustainable development goals for the UN. I should say 17 actually, it's 16. There's in fact 17 of them. And some of those, as you can see here, which relate to fuel poverty. So there's 4 there that clearly link and have a close tie. So at the moment, we're mapping out across the authority the role that all departments have in relation to all of those 17 things, including these 4 here, to identify what roles people can play, because sometimes people have not really identified what it is they're doing and how it impacts on those issues. So
I can't actually see your slides going through them. Are you working off a slide now? Because
yeah,
if you are, I can't see the actual slide. I can only see the introduction.
Okay.
Sorry, can you, if you start your slideshow, we'll be able to see it.
Right. So right, thank you for telling me.
Sorry.
I can see it going through, but I can't. Right, okay. Let's see. So if I do this, do you see something? No?
You need to start your slideshow.
Yes, I did. I have.
Oh, it's not working this end, I'm afraid.
Right. Okay. So that's the issue.
Yeah.
It says you're screen sharing on here as well. Yeah, it's also got at the top of my thing. It says you are screen sharing.
Yeah. Can I suggest you might have 2 opens? It's happened to me before now, where I've got 2 open by mistake, and you're maybe looking at you're looking at one, and the screen and the slideshow's on another. Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe. Well, the one that's moving on my, but I've got 2 screens open and they're both moving at the same rate. So when I'm okay, right. Well, that's great. I'll just have to talk to it then, because if you can't see it, there's no point, is there?
If you highlight on the slide which you're now talking on, go down your screen and just highlight on it. It might help.
I don't think it's doing anything, is it?
Yeah. I think you've got the wrong screen open, but I might be wrong.
Well, it's got on the screen I've got open, it says you're screen sharing. So the one that's moving actually says screen sharing, and it actually still asks me if I want to stop sharing. So
maybe stop and start again.
That's what's puzzling me. Okay.
Well, that's working. That's about to work. Try again.
Not sure it's going to come back now. Let me try. Sorry about that, folks. I don't know what's happened there.
Yeah, it's a problem with having 2 screens with Zoom. It never knows which one to look at.
Yeah, well, it's quite strange because the thing I got open actually said I was screen sharing, so I thought I was all right.
Yeah, if you do it again, what I'll do is I'll try to get remote control of your screen and then see if I can get it to show.
Yeah, I've got to try and get it back now. 1 second. It's all gone haywire. Right, now got it back. Yep. So what would you like to do?
So if you screen share again, and then you'll get a message from me asking for permission to control your screen.
Right. Now got says your screen sharing. You see anything?
Yeah, we're seeing
I got
PowerPoint.
approve. See it? Got a green thing round it, so it suggests me you have got it. Have you? You got it?
We
You
can
just
see your
went through.
screen.
I just saw it rush through very quickly, and then it's disappeared.
Yeah, I can see it now, but it needs to be on. It needs to be on slideshow.
Yeah,
view.
slideshow. Yeah. Well, you can do that from.
You carry on talking, Brett, and let him sort it out.
Yeah, because I still got control of it by the looks of it here, so it's just a bit crazy. I did give hand over. Yes, it's Brian's hat controlling the screen. Can you see it, Brian? How weird. Anyway, can't even see my notes now where I am. Yeah. Okay. So, you got it, Brian. Just click at the bottom right on the little screen slideshow. Right down to the bottom menu bar down there. That one. It's just wishing through really fast. Just to do it on that in that format with the things at the side. Doesn't matter. So I talked about that. It's the field poverty key areas. If we keep going down, talked about NHS. Next slide 7 was most probably. Can people see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Brian. Okay, so so I was mentioning the development of the strategy, which is kind of covering those areas. So at the moment, I'm trying to coordinate across the whole authority. So different departments looking at the role they play in relation to those issues and exploring sort of it from every avenue in terms of how we can address those issues. Because sometimes people work in departments in a certain way and might not realize that they actually have an opportunity to help address certain issues. So we're currently going through a process of exploring that across all of the heads of service across the council. If I go to the next slide, which is this one, which is keeping Coventry warm itself. It's really giving sort of work. We're working with Act on Energy, who won the tender to deliver the service across the city. They're working very closely with various health professionals within the city council and with members of my team, particularly Jenny Bowker, who heads up on fuel poverty issues within the city. So. And what we're looking at is providing advice and information, but also improving energy efficiency measures. And there's 4 kind of strands of funding there, which are supporting that. So 4 sorts of activities which are helping to support that. So if we go to the next slide, the first one was the boiler repair, which is funded by Public Health. And we clearly see some real benefits to doing that. Often something is difficult to find funding from other sources, so it's quite useful that it's coming from them. The next one, vulnerable household support. Now this is disability facilities grant. Often there's underspends on disability facilities grant. And we're saying, well, we as a policy, and we've kind of negotiated this as well nationally as well, that is recognised that is legitimate use to use that funding to address also energy efficiency within the home. And if you think about it, many people with certain disabilities are particularly vulnerable if the energy efficiency is poor within the home, and it can seriously damaging to health and risky. So therefore it's kind of legitimate, and we have to review the spend on the grants every year with a view to making sure that what's not likely to be spent on modifications gets spent on improving energy efficiency. So it's a budget that will vary from year to year, but that's how we're currently running that, and it seems to be working effectively. Have we gone to the next slide? It's also the Green Homes Grant. Now we've just put we had LAD round 1A. We put in a bid, we got $500,000. We went for $500,000 basically because that was the capacity that providers had to be able to deliver the service. We would have put in for loads of more if we could. The thing was that government insisted it's got to all be delivered before spring next year. We've got to have all the work done. And in order to do that, obviously the capacity to provide that service from the various contractors, etc., was an issue. Now, for many local authorities, couldn't actually bid because they didn't have any kind of programs in place or any kind of procurement mechanisms in place to enable them to bid. Coventry was fortunate that it had those frameworks in place, and it did have contractors. We're now also bidding with LAD 1B, the second round, and that's for $2.5 million, and that's in partnership with a utility provider and Act on Energy, which is being submitted. And in that one, we've had a lot of targeted work. I was talking about using European Space Agency data and stuff. We've been piloting use of that for that particular project. So we're looking at improvements. But if you took just the $500,000, it equates to about 46 vulnerable households being improved, which is kind of a drop in the ocean when you look at the scale of our issues. So it gives the people a feel for what the extent of the task is at hand. One RSL that I spoke to has something like 47,000 properties, and to get them to just a C rating would cost them about 917 million. So it kind of gives you a feel for the scale of the issue across the West Midlands. It's enormous, and it is quite a challenge for us to see how we're going to address this. But it's something we're taking really seriously. But we're putting bids in for funding, which sound like large sums of money, but actually they don't go as far as one would like them to go. But obviously that's the scale of the issues having to deal with, and particularly with solid wall insulation projects and things, and cladding and things like that. And if you're familiar with Energy Sprong, it doesn't come cheap, and we're looking at is there ways of doing that kind of thing to scale, which would actually lower the costs, because the costs of projects that we've seen around the country are very high. But we think that it could be done for less. And there's one utility, one RSL at the moment that we've been talking to about looking at potential social enterprise in this area. If we go on to the next one, so essentially, that's the aims of what Human Ecology Warm is trying to do. And it's a difficult task, but it's really important that people do get the advice and support. And I think one of the real strengths of our project is that it's involving grassroots health professionals, people who are sort of one-to-one meeting with people, understanding their situation, and then putting them in touch with those that can help in relation to the technical expertise for energy efficiency. And then lastly, I'll end on this, which is what I'll talk about most probably in the future. But I mentioned this regional energy systems operator. This is quite fundamental and quite important, and it's something that Andy Street at West Midlands Combined Authority is very interested in. WMCA are one of the funders for this as well, but it's looking at how we manage energy in the future. It's all done centrally at the moment. Are there new models that can be more regional and more local, so that we can actually develop the infrastructure and assess need and meet demand? Because now with modern where we're moving away from large power stations towards lots of localized renewable sources of energy coming from loads of different sources, very more complex, but also more local in terms of the provision. So we could meet about 50% of our energy needs within the city boundaries. That's still not, that's not 100%. It's miles off, 50%, but that's realistic for a city of the size of Coventry. So we haven't got a lot of hinterland or places where we can put, for example, wind power and things like that. But it still nevertheless is helped nationally in terms of reduce the burden and trying to get down to zero carbon. So there's some real issues, interesting projects going on at the moment where we're looking at potential investors and people interested in that. We got a CDP rating as a carbon disclosure project or program. It's an international program which involves companies and cities and the like. We were A star rated. We're now gone down to A minus, and one of the key reasons is we've actually been more effective at our recording of energy use. So we've actually found areas where there's further energy use, and also the issue for us is around having a target set. Now we just agreed the target recently with Eurocities, but unfortunately when we submitted our application we didn't have that in place, so that affected our rating, although we do have one now. But it's something we're working very strongly on, making sure that with the processes of which we monitor energy consumption and use across the city is something which Birmingham University have been helping us with as well. But the big challenge is the next one, is the registered social landlords, retrofit and future build, because it's not just about knowledge or awareness or any of those things. It's about the commitment to doing it. And when I asked the question, how many people within the organisations within an RSL have energy management experience or an energy management professional, the number is very small. It's less than it was. And one of the reasons is that focus around the Grenfell disaster has shifted their focus towards safety and less towards the energy efficiency issues. That's some of the comments that I've received from talking to senior director level RSL manager and management. But there is a real need to address this issue. And how do we go about it? So in Coventry, we're at the moment just starting conversations at senior level, director level with a number of RSLs, the major RSLs that provide services in the city, to try and understand what are the barriers for take up. So, for example, when you've got a government offer which is basically going to pay 70% of the cost, but you're still not going ahead, and even when you only need 30% of the funding, there's some key issues there that are more fundamental than just about commitment. It's also about actually the financial models that they have to operate under. Do they actually help address energy efficiency? And I'm not sure they do at the moment. And it's something we want to have that dialogue to understand and feed back to relevant parties to see if we can get some change and support registered social landlords in dealing with those issues. And then you've got the issue which obviously referred to about private landlords, and that's an even bigger challenge. But let's see how we can move on that. So that would figure very strongly as part of our climate change strategy and action plan, because it'd be commitments of other organisations, and this is a key area within there. So I do see this as a key challenge coming up in the coming year or so. So the intention is to have an independent commission established, which will get a plan ready for 2022 onwards. So it's going to take us about a year to get all those parties together, to work things out, assess all the needs, try and find secure commitments and resources. And it was something that will adapt and develop over time. I don't think it's going to be all singing or dancing by 2022. I think there'll be some key players that will be on board and there'll be some key commitments, but it was something that's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But that's our challenge, and that's an interesting challenge, a big challenge, but an important one. And fuel poverty is an important part of that. It's very much a political priority in Coventry to address those issues. There's a very clear understanding with the connectivity between climate change and inequalities and all those kind of issues, and how they relate to how people are differently affected by those environmental issues. So it's a real key area for our work over the coming year, and be welcoming to work with a number of you in the future. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you very much, Brett. Has anybody got any questions they want to put to Brett? I was just wondering what the European Space Agency can do that aerial thermal imaging couldn't, but it's a long conversation.
Yes, it's more accurate, and because you don't actually, with thermal imaging, often it's done with certain days. This you can do a continual basis, so you can actually average out over time as well. So it actually, because it's continual geostationary orbit type satellite imagery and things, you can get a lot more technical information, more accuracy.
Before when we did it, when I was at Coventry, it could only be the plane could only fly over if the temperature inversion was correct and all kinds of technical.
Yeah, that's right. And there's all those kind of things which kind of make it then a bit iffy, don't they? So so it's interesting.
Brilliant. Thank you, Brett. Thank you very much indeed. And sorry about the glitches earlier on with the technology.
No, it's funny, isn't it? I've got to figure that one out now.
I blame Dr. Zoom. I have no idea what makes those things happen. Okay, I've got a couple of bits of news, just stuff I've been made aware of recently for general information, general interest. At the end of November, the DWP announced, you probably know this, a new COVID grant scheme, which is £170 million for local authorities, and the money's available now. It needs to be spent by the end of March. So that's another kind of, there'll be a rush for that, I'm sure. But interestingly enough, and what makes this a little different to other grants that have been available for people in pure poverty is that it isn't focused on benefits, and it's left to the local authority to use their databases, resources, partnerships and whatever to establish and identify people who are in need, and they're not necessarily benefit claimants. So talking to adult social care, talking to troubled families agencies and so on. And that's quite welcome really, because a lot of people fall through the cracks because they don't receive certain benefits but still are in need. So that's quite a good thing. Along that line, there's been a survey of families on universal credit and child tax credit that found that 26% of them are already cutting back on heating and electricity. This was published in October. 60% of these people have gone into debt, and this is largely as a result of the lockdown. On average, families apparently borrowed over £1,700 in the last 2 months alone. Again, this is universal credit claimants. So over a third have been left worse off by the pandemic as well. And there's loads more stuff I could go through. Excess winter deaths are up on last year. They're 19.2% now or something. However many percentages is unacceptable, but that's what it is at the moment. For those of you who have an interest in smart meters, and we get a lot of inquiries about smart meters, Utilita, who have traditionally been fitting the first generation smart meters, METS 1, and have continued to do so despite not being allowed to, if you like. They put up a lot of barriers and said that they're not going to fit METS 2. There's a number of reasons for that. I won't go into them, but anyway, Ofgem has given them notice that if they don't start fitting the second generation meter, which is the one that is exchangeable between energy companies as far as the signalling is concerned and sending the meter readings, if they don't start doing that, they're going to be fined quite heavily. So they've got to fit 250 METS 2 meters by April next year, and then another further 15,000 by July next year. So the race is on for them. I'm not going to go into any more than that, but just to say, anybody else got anything they need to, or they would like to say before we close? Okay, well then I will make sure that you all receive a link to where this presentation will be on our website, and I'll also copy those links that are on the chat line there around you, so you can look at them at your leisure. So thanks very much indeed again for all taking part, and the next forum is likely to be probably March, April time, and hopefully you know, this time round maybe we can squeeze some more, get more people in. We missed out on Bays this time round, we missed out on Ofgem. It would be nice to see them next time. So I hope to see you all there. And what's your thoughts generally if we made it a day-long event? Anybody any thoughts on that? Yes, no? It could be in 2 halves, so you don't need to attend both.
2 hours would work.
Yeah. Yeah, I might put an email around asking the question. You don't want to sit looking at me for a whole day, do you? Really? No. Thanks, Phil, for that nod of approval.
I think all day would be a little bit too long. It might be good if you did something perhaps in the morning, and then what was really useful from the last forum when we had the breakout sessions.
I know, I'd love to have done it.
Yeah, and then perhaps if people want to talk about it a little bit more detail, then they've got opportunity to join a breakout session perhaps in the afternoon. That might be something that might work a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay. Put it in the mix anyway, but I'd love to hear from you. Just email me and tell me what you think, tell what you like, tell what you don't, warts and all. I'm never offended. So
yeah, we've started doing our team meetings at Eon, to be honest, in 2 halves, haven't we, Phil?
We have,
and it works much better. It just means you're not away. Like, we'll have the first part of the team meeting we'll have on a Monday, and then the second half would be on the Wednesday afternoon or something. It means you're not away from your desk all day long as well.
So, my ears can't take too much with having these headphones on.
I know. So no, it works quite well, to be honest. Yeah,
it does.
I like the breakout sessions as well. They've done that in the Southwest, and obviously you've done it before, and it's really nice to actually get to see people and talk to them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know. I wish I'd done it this time, but as I say, I put out an appeal for speakers, and we had fantastic. We had an overwhelming response. And I'm sure that some of the people who spoke today could have spoken for longer than they had time for. But thank you to all of them anyway for what they did. Just one final thing from NEA. We are at the moment, I'll put this out there, but don't please broadcast it widely. But if people referred into you with prepayment, unable to afford their prepayment top-ups, then please refer them to us. Okay. For a limited time, we may be able to help, but we do require a significant burden of proof because we have to be very secure in the knowledge that the people who are applying actually live at that address and are in need. So we do need proof either from them or from the people who refer them. But for those in need, we can sometimes supply the vouchers. Okay, Act on Energy at the moment have run out, so pass them on to us. We can't promise everybody can get something, but we'll do what we can. Okay, that's it from me.
Phil, I sent you a quick chat.
Sorry?
I sent you a chat on the thing. You should have it.
Yeah, seeing that, Brett, we'll give you a call.
Okay, cheers. Right.
All right, thanks everybody. I'll catch you soon then. Have a great Christmas.
Same to you.
And, right, thanks very much. Nice.
Do all the things you shouldn't do.
Bye.
Okay.
I hope it's a nice warm one.
Oh, of course it'll be warm and snowy.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.